Welcome back to the Culture Based Podcast. I'm Dustin. He's Blake. Episode 42. This is part 2 of our series, Are You Scalable? And today we're going to get into the formula. We have a lot of content to throw at you, so I'm going to get the business out of the way and we'll get right to it. I want to remind you that at the Culture Based, we're here to help leaders know what they're about, show where they're going, and develop scalable teams to get them there. That's what this series is all about. If you're listening on audio podcast platforms, so glad you're listening. Thank you for that. We would love for you to leave a 5-star rating and review. This content gets released every single week. Also on YouTube, you can find us there. If you are watching us there, hello. We're so glad you're here. We would love for you to like, subscribe, ring the bell, all of that jazz. And that way you're notified every time we drop new content. We're dropping a lot more shorts and reels. You have told us through our analytics that you love the little bits and pieces, love little bite-sized pieces of the Culture Base. And so we're doing more of that for you, releasing a couple of those every week instead of just the one that we'd been doing. So make sure you tune in there. Those reels and stuff or shorts on YouTube are also shared on Instagram. And like I said, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, all the places like that, which you can find us at The Culture Base, BASE, or you can find us at theculturebase.com. And if you'd like to talk with us about any of these things that we're discussing in this series specifically, Are You Scalable? Then you can go to theculturebase.com, click on the strategy button, or theculturebase.com/strategy and book a free 30-minute strategy session with us. That might be the fastest I've ever gone through all that. And I'm a bit winded, but we're not. But now we're going to get into it. I'm not done talking yet. I know Blake's eager to talk, but just hang on. All right. Listener, watcher, viewer, guest. Last week we discussed the question, are you scalable? And discussed how there are a few defining factors for that scalability. But ultimately, the most important factor is your team. This week, we're going to dive into a formula that allows you to determine your team's scalability. And I know you're all thinking right now, that sounds made up. There's no way you can quantify this. But as we discussed last week, culture is, in fact, quantifiable. Am I saying that right, Blake?
You are. You are saying it excellently.
I'm in my head today. I don't know if I'm saying words the right way or not. So I just need you to nod a lot for me today. So there are data points to help you determine your scalability of your team. Like we said last week, culture is quantifiable, and that's what we're going to get into today, right, Blake?
Absolutely. Yeah, so last week, diving into all those, what we call permission to play scalable factors, right? So these are is your product relevant? Is it lasting? Like those types of things, got to have those in place. But then we go to this, is your scalability going to be lasting and authentic? Okay, so there's a lot of companies that get a great product and it like blows up right away, and then they're like, wow, there is no stopping this. And like we've seen over and over in story after story, it does end up fizzling out. And so this is where I think that there's just age-old wisdom. You know, there's the whole parable of the sower or whatever, even in the Bible, that talks about how seed was scattered in different places. And in some places, it hit like the rocks. And I think about this a lot because when it hit the rocks, it sprouted up really quick. And it showed like, oh my gosh, what growth. But it had no substance to really find itself in to have lasting growth that at the end would be harvested for 10, 20, 30 fold what it went in for. And so that's what we're trying to get to here, is a place where we have the right soil in our growth. And that's where the cultural aspect comes into play. And so, we dive into this today. We do believe there is a way to say the soil is right, that you have the right pieces, and there is a formula for that. And it is the word said correctly today, quantifiable. Okay. Mm-hmm. So we are going to dive into that with our formula. Do you mean to dive into the formula, or you want it?
Yeah, you go ahead. I'm going to put it up on the screen for everybody.
Okay. So before we dive into this totally, I'm take it off the screen. Get it out of there.
He goes, I'm going to go into it. No, I'm not.
Okay. Not all variables are equal. This is important because when you're looking at your team and you're like, what's at risk, you can look at different pieces to know where you need to be investing. Okay. If this is an addition problem, then you know that it doesn't really matter. Both of them have got to be, you got to play both of those variables the same. If this is a multiplication against a different number, you know where your multiplier is more important at times. Okay. So here is the formula. Maybe it'll make more sense here. First, we have the right people. That's our variable A. We'll get into what these things mean. But the right people plus connected to the right work plus they have clarity and direction on the purpose. Now we're going to stop there for a second. So right people, right work, clarity on the purpose. That right there is going to make up your baseline. Okay. So
those are equal contributors.
Equal contributors. But at the end of the day, they create this standard number by which we're going to experience multipliers. Okay. So right people connected to the right work, and they have clarity on the purpose, and they're motivated by that purpose. Okay. Then we multiply that whole thing. So if you're a big math nerd like I am, you put all of that in parentheses. Remember, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, the order of operations. Put all that in the parentheses. Then your multiplier is first the environment that supports growth and development. And this part gets missed all the time. Okay. After that multiplier hits your baseline, then you will take a percentage of your accountable communication. Okay. So there's where accountability comes into play, where your metrics and your following and your targets. And so all of that has to play together. So simply people, right work, purpose times the environment or culture that supports growth and development times the percentage of which you and your team are good at accountable communication. And then that number, the best number you can get on all that is a 90. So here's what we have. So in each of these, your people, work, and purpose are like a 1 to 10 scale. And we're going to show how those numbers all come together here in a minute. Your environment is a multiplier of a 1 to 3. And then your percentage is, 1 to 100. So pretty baseline. But the best you could ever get is a 90. Okay. And so as you're looking at your team, having quantifiable measures make action way more logical than just feeling based. And a lot of times we live in this world of culture is frou-frou and it's not tangible, and it is
all ethereal.
Yeah, exactly. It's all in the ether. Whatever happens, and that's not true. There is a way to know that you have the right team to do this work scalably.
That's right.
Is that right? Yeah, scalably. Okay.
Yeah, I want to say too about it only adding up to 90. As we progress through the rest of this series, you're going to hear us talk about different types of culture. And the last one that we're going to talk about is the ideal culture. Now, the word ideal is used because it's still not perfect. There's no such thing as the perfect culture because there's no such thing as perfection. Yeah. That doesn't mean we don't strive for excellence, though. So when you look at that number and you go 90, how do I get 100? Well, 100 will be perfection. And that's not what you can do. The best you can do is ideal. The best you can do is control what you can control and not worry about the rest. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. These are the factors that you can control. So let's start. I'm going to leave this formula for those watching on YouTube. I'm going to leave this formula up on the screen for the rest of the episode so that you can see what we're talking about. But let's start with the very first part of the formula, part A, if you will. It's the right people. So here's some questions that we ask when we come in and work with you on, do you have a scalable culture? And if you're asking yourself, if you have a scalable team, if the soil is ripe, the first thing you're going to ask is, do you have the right people? So in this, straight up right now, currently, do you have the right people? Not did you have the right people? Not will you have the right people? Currently, right now, do you have the right people? And if you ask any good leader, they can tell you probably off the top of their head. They're like, yeah, we probably have about 80% of the right people right now. Well, if it's a 1 out of 10 scale, then you would grade yourself an 8 here, right? Do they have the right people? Second thing, how quickly can you find the right people? How quickly can you find the right people? Again, 1 to 10 there. This is a big one. We've talked many times about this before, but turnover is a major part of this. So what is your turnover percentage? And if we're talking about a 1 to 10 scale, this is just mathematics at this point. This isn't, here's kind of what I'm thinking. This is straight up. You can look at the data over the last 18 to 24 months, see what your average rate of turnover is. If you're like, wow, our average rate of turnover is 30%, then you can just say, okay, well, we're going to give ourselves a 7 there because obviously we're 70% good, right on what that is. Is that right? Is that how we're grading this?
Yeah, absolutely. And what I would say there is be honest here, because if you're like, I think it's pretty good, you don't know. Okay.
That means you don't know. Yeah.
The whole point of what we're trying to do here is get away from these. Business leaders love to go by their gut, but your gut doesn't always tell you what you spent. Okay. Mm-hmm. And this is like, I think my family and I were pretty good at our budget until I start taking account for all the expenses that add up that I can't add up in my head because I'm an emotional being. Okay. Mm-hmm. So same thing here. Like Dustin just said, don't just be like, oh, I think our turnover is pretty good. Like if you don't know how to figure out turnover, there's problem number 1. Okay. Mm-hmm. Then do what Dustin said, dive into the numbers, figure out your turnover percentage year over year, right? Like what are we keeping? What are we losing? And also in that turnover percentage, how long are people staying? It's not just turnover. It's, do you only keep people for 2 years? Do you keep people for 3 years? Like what's your longevity aspect? Are you losing some people just because you realize they don't fit the mold? Or are you losing people because you at year 2 to 3, people don't feel like they can grow anymore? There's data there. Okay.
Yeah, it's not just year over year what that turnover is. It's like Blake said, how long they're staying. The last thing in this right people category, and this one could feel like it's like you could just kind of go off your gut, but I think there's data here too that you could look at. Right. And the question is, the org attracts people well. Mm-hmm. Your organization attracts people well. To me, like you can interject, the best way to determine that, or the easiest way to determine that is how many people apply when you have an open position. Are you struggling to get applications? That means your org isn't attracting people well. Yeah. If you're getting more applications than you can handle, then your organization is attracting people very well.
Yeah. And also, if like how many streams of inbound do you have? How many do you need? Like, are you going out and constantly trying to look at the same streams like Indeed and all these other job boards or whatever, where you're getting the same people and you're like, I don't get it. I've got 30 streams of people coming in, but they're all reading from the same data. Like that's one stream. Okay. Then I would say how are you being creative to go to a point where you're coming up with new creative streams to find people? And if that's the case and you have multiple streams and you see, just like Dustin was saying, your inbound resumes and people seeking your company increases, then you've got a good stream. Okay. So I think that's another part of this. And by the way, as we dig into this formula with you at the Culture Base, we go deep. Okay. So it isn't like, how do you feel? Okay, there's a number. Like this is a high level for you to kind of quickly see where you think your company is. But if you want to not be as emotional and you want people asking you hard questions so that you actually know where your company is, that's when to reach out to us. Okay. So that's the right people. The second one in our equation, B, is connected to the right work, right? So this is the will, this is where we dive into, don't worry, it's an acronym. What's that? What are we diving into here?
We have an acronym.
We do have okay. Will is the acronym. I was like, what are you talking about? We have an acronym. No, 100%. So when we say it's the will, it is the want, the instinct, the love or the passion, and the leverage, which is your natural capacity. So we've talked about in the past that ancient Hebrew word for work is also worship, which that word is avod. And it's interesting because it's not that we worship the work that we do. It's just when you're doing it, you're connected at such a level, the outflow is just worship, right? It's just like, wow, this is it. And I know that a lot of business leaders and business owners get that, and we think, oh yeah, but like people down low, they don't get this. No, they do. They absolutely connect to it. They're just looking for that place, and that's why they're going to other companies searching. But that want, that desire for said thing is um, pretty intrinsic, right? Like, do you want this thing? In fact, even in EOS and traction and stuff, when they talk about wanting it, like the get it, want it, and capacity to do it, want it, especially on a team that is going to scale. If they don't want it, but they're great at it, they intuitively understand it, but they just don't want it, don't put them on your team. I am telling you, it is the worst thing you can have is someone who is perfect for the job and doesn't want the thing. Okay, don't do that. So we would score that, the wanted aspect. Then we would look at the instinct, or do they get it? Do they just naturally have an understanding for this? As soon as you show them all the pieces and then you have like the block set, the child just grabs it and puts it in the right place, right? Like that is just the natural, like, oh, I get what's about to happen here. Instead of the kid where you put all that stuff in front of them and they're like, where's my crayon? And you're like, no, we're doing something else here. Okay. That's like the instinct aspect. Then you've got the love, the passion, someone who doesn't necessarily, and I think this is where like people, especially leaders, misunderstand this. And especially leaders, I would say, who don't have sexy industries. Okay. Cause you want to be like, we make tires. Who is like, ooh, I want tires. Like that is not what you're looking for. What you're looking for is someone who connects to, if I put this chemical and this chemical together and they fuse together and they create this type of rubber, what happens? And what if we added this? That's what you're looking for. You're looking for the passion behind someone who loves the idea of using their giftings in such a way to elevate something else completely. Okay. So you're not always going to find that in like, do I think all my people are like, I love electricity? I don't think that. But I do find people who connect to it spatially. And when they all of a sudden can harness an invisible to the naked eye character or variable or whatever it is, and they can take that and do stuff with it, and that they're adding power to people's lives and helping them do the thing they're great at, that's how I want to help them connect to that passion. And I'm looking for people like that. If they're like, it's just electricity and I don't care about this, okay, that's going to score really low.
Yeah, can I say there too, Blake? I think for me, I mean, you just talked a little bit about kind of the emotional connection, and I think that plays in here as well. And I think there's a story to everything that we're creating. Yeah. So I'll use both analogies that Blake gave you real quickly because we have a lot more content to get through. But in the tire story of you're just a person who mixes the chemical compound enough to make the right compound for the tires. My emotional Enneagram 4 brain goes to think of all the places people will go and the things that they'll be able to experience and see because of your tires. And then same thing with the electricity aspect of Blake's company, Ridgeline. Like I go, okay, well, think of all the things that will be powered up. Like right now, there's power in that's running this podcast and the cameras and the microphones and the computers and things like that. Like we wouldn't be able to do this without electricity. And so there's a company like Blake's who is providing ways for that to happen. They're connecting the right wires together. They're building the structure, the infrastructure together for you to be able to create things that no one has ever seen before. So I always connect back to the emotional story of it. Yeah. And if they have a hard time connecting with that, to Blake's point, they're probably not super passionate about it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely so good. The last aspect of will is leverage. This is the natural capacity to do the said thing. So I think a lot about, and I don't know who the famous person was who put this out there, the quote wise, because I've heard 9 people quoted for it, but it's that whole idea of talent fails to work hard or something like that. What is it? Hard work.
It's something along the lines of how It's the talent will only take you but so far.
Yeah. So what? Hard work or talent, doesn't over trump. Okay, so here's what it is. Yeah, talent does not overcome
Man, I
hard
love the
work.
people watching on
It's so
YouTube
good.
right
They're
now.
like,
Just
he's
all the
really
smoke
trying.
coming out of his ears.
Yeah. Talent tries it only goes so far. It cannot beat hard work. But hard work plus talent is unbelievable. Okay. Quote Blake Bear. That's the one I think we miss here, is that there is natural capacity to people. Almost think of it like a well. Like some people have a well of capacity to just be filled and be filled and be filled with potential natural talent. Okay. I think there are probably people who have worked much harder than Michael Jordan, even at basketball, I would say. But Michael Jordan's well of capacity, plus the fact that he was a relentless hard worker, combined made him Michael Jordan. Okay. So that's where I think if you can understand that there's like this desire, the want, the hard work, the push, the fight, and there's this capacity, which is the well of the amount that you can dig into and go towards, that is your leverage. That's your natural capacity. It's funny. We have a way that when we hire people, we look at people's will and their leverage through one of our assessments. And so then it eventually scores people on a certain, like, hey, as an electrician, how would they do? As a project manager, how would they do? As a field supervisor, and it uses those natural leverage positions to figure that out. I only score as a 70 as an electrician. Okay. I have team members who score like 94 or 98. And one time I had a kind of a first year guy who scored a 94, and at the time was like one of the highest I've ever seen. And I did the dumbest thing possible. I told him, I was like, wow, man, you score like a 94 as an electrician. I go, I only score a 70. And he said, oh, so I'm like a 24% better electrician than you? I go, no, you aren't shit. And he was like, what? I go, you're not anything. I have put in hard work. I have put in effort. I have come to understand things at a level you haven't done yet. So you may have a well of capacity at which you can do, but if all you ever do is just skim off the top, you're not going to be anything. And after that, he became like a pretty badass electrician because it challenged him in such a way that he got out of my capacity is my ability, or like, oh, I am my capacity. Then he understood a much deeper aspect. But anyway, what we got next?
Yeah. So next is part C. This is the end of the first set of the addition part of the formula. So we talked about the right people. A, we talked about connected to the right work. B, now we're going to talk about right clarity on purpose. And for this one, again, yes, we are going to use an acronym. So our acronym here for the right clarity on purpose, right? We're talking clarity. Let's get clear. Let's get clear with it. So our acronym here for us to kind of grade through and assess, do we have the right clarity on purpose, is an acronym of CLEAR, CLEAR. The C stands for communicated. Is the vision communicated? Yeah. Now, this is something that, again, you may lean towards thinking it's communicated, but the hard data, however you say it, of feedback loops and surveys within your company that everybody should have will tell you just how communicated the vision is. If your team can't spew back to you what the vision of the company is, then that's a clear indicator. See what I said there? Clear. That it's not communicated very well. The L is lasting. Is the vision lasting? Is this something that can last from generation to generation within your company, or is it just for now? And we're going to talk about for now here in a second. The E is the vision exciting, or is it boring as hell? If your vision as a tire company is to make rubber, like, that's not exciting. But if your vision as a tire company is to send people across the world on journeys they've never been before, I'm into it. Let's go.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? It's exciting. There's different things there. Is it actionable? Is your vision actionable? If your vision doesn't spur me on to some sort of action towards that vision, then it's not clear. It's super muddy. And then the last thing, is it relevant? We talked about, is it for now? Yes, we want it to be lasting, but we also want it to be relevant. Is this something that is useful for today? Right. So if we were in the era of flying cars, then the tires market might not be as relevant. Maybe for taking off and landing, but again, not as relevant. So you get what I'm saying here, is that making sure that your vision is clear, communicated, lasting, exciting, actionable, and relevant to the times. That's how you know that your team has the right clarity on purpose.
Yeah, and that's good. Yeah, and that's the way to understand if it's clear is that they can't just regurgitate your statement that you came up with and made everyone memorize, but they say it in their own words with passion behind it. That's how you know that they're connected and it's there. So that's absolutely great. So A, B, and C, right people, right work, clarity on purpose, that makes up your baseline. Okay, so now at this point, if you scored a 7 on people, a 6 on the right work, and an 8 on clarity and purpose.
It's 21.
Thank you. Divided by 3. So that's a 7. So you would have a 7 as a baseline. Now we're going to go to multipliers. And you might think, well, no, the right people, those are multipliers. They're really like, they are sure like for the baseline, but the things that change everything is your environment. Okay. If a person comes and goes who isn't the right person, you get them out and you put someone in there, like that adds to it, but it is not a multiplier in the sense. Okay. And I love saying that like everyone is replaceable on a team. And I know that sounds like horrible and anti-culture, but everyone's replaceable. Okay. So, and not to make it sound so anti-family here, but it's just a reality. An environment that supports the growth and development is our first multiplier. Okay, so when we're going through here, we're looking on a scale of 1 to 3. The last ones were 1 to 10. This is a 1 to 3 multiplier. And we're asking questions. We're asking a lot of questions to understand this environment. So how long does it take to train your people? And you're going to need to dig into this, not just like in general, probably like 3 months. By the way, you probably need to almost 10x as long as you think it takes to develop people, because it takes longer than you think. If you're like, it probably takes 3 months to train an electrician, wrong. Okay. I think one of the basic rules of thumb is however long the task takes to do, multiply by 10.
Yeah.
That's a lot. And that's not like a me thing. That is 100% like people who do that data stuff. And so
it's a standard. It's a standard.
It is a standard. 10x the time amount to do the task once you have it. Okay. So, if, for example, receptacles, we try an install of a receptacle at 7 minutes. So how much time should I use developing? 70 minutes. Sounds like a lot. Sounds ridiculous. But if I want to get them to that point, I got to hit that. So how long does it take to train people? And then looking around on each of those areas, not just the entry level or the mid level, you're looking at all areas. So how long does it take to train them? Then are there noticeable understood opportunities for growth and development? You might be like, oh, of course you can grow in our company. Is it clear? Are you sure that they know that they can grow in that? Because one of the top 3 reasons people leave companies is because they don't believe they have the ability to grow. What company doesn't have the ability to grow? They all do. But if they're not clear and visually showing and helping team members know you can go from this point to this point by doing these said things, maybe not. Now, I do believe there's a point in time. This is just personal opinion here. I believe there's a point in time that if you're like, what's my way to get to the CEO from this point? No, because there is a point in time you've got to learn the hard part and create the aspect of it too. Okay. So I do believe there is a point where you have like a kind of a hard stop there. The next one is, do people feel connected to the team? Are they connecting at a different level? Do they feel like they understand one another and that they're working with people instead of against people? There's less silos. Is there a spirit of safety and positivity? And I mean, safety a lot of times is not like, am I going to get shot? Sure, that's important. I think we should feel that. But the safety I'm talking about in today's day and age is way more emotional safety. Can I throw out an idea here and not get completely berated or said that I don't know what I'm talking about, or I can't communicate because I'm afraid? Like that's the kind of fear that we're worried about, or the safety that we're worried about. Our process is clear and followed. Are they available? When someone says, man, we need a process for this, do you roll your eyes because you do have a process and they just don't know about it? I guess the worst thing possible. And it happens. It happens in my organization all the time. I'm like, I thought we had a process for this. And then the team's like, yeah, we do. I'm like, oh, shoot. Well, we're doing a bad job of communicating that. Next, the question is there a coaching process in place? And it doesn't have to be that one person's coaching everything. Okay, I think that's important to understand. Doesn't mean that the leader is always doing all the coaching. What this means is, do you have a structure in place to make sure that people have a place to ask questions and be developed on the next stage of their growth? A lot of times this is a top-down approach and you constantly just develop your team below you. But you got to have something. You got to have good questions. You got to have some structure. And the structure is just there to facilitate the conversation. So that's your environment that supports growth and development.
Yeah, so just to continue on through the formula here, Blake, if we got a 21 in the first bracket and we're a 1 to 3 here, let's say you overall, like we do allow kind of fractional stuff here, so maybe you can do the math for me, Blake, while I'm saying this out loud. But let's say you got 21 in your first bracket of the A, B, and C, and let's say you scored out of 3, you scored a 2.6 on an environment that supports growth and development. That brings us to
54.6.
So 54.6 going into the last section, which is multiplied by the percentage of accountable communication. Accountable communication. You can have everything up to this point. You're probably gonna be like, wow, there's a lot of weight on this whole accountable communication thing. Yeah, for good reason. Because you can have everything else that we've talked about absolutely perfect. But if your accountable communication is crap, none of it matters. None of it matters. You've basically poured acid on that good soil and you've ruined the soil by not communicating it effectively and with accountability. And so here's the questions that we're asking, the categories that we're going through when we're talking about accountable communication. Number 1, there are correct metrics in place that are clear, known, and followed by all. Has to have all 3 of those. Clear, known, and followed by all on any metrics that are super important to you in the vision and the success of the overall company. Otherwise, what are we doing? Mm-hmm. What are we aiming for? What's the win? No one knows. Mm-hmm. Secondly, respectful candor. Candor is super important, but if it comes at the cost of disrespect, you have just murdered the soil again. It will be no good. Nothing will flourish. Scalability, down the tank. Thirdly, your people are not afraid to ask for help. They're not afraid to ask for help. And there's some of the stuff in the last one in growth and development that we talked about of a spirit of safety and positivity. And are there noticeable opportunities? This is another one of those things where people not afraid to ask for help. The only way for you to know that is to ask your people, hey, how do you feel about asking for help? Yeah. Is there any hesitancy there? Mm-hmm. And based on the feedback they give you, not your feeling of how awesome you are and how great your company is. This is real data points that you can gather from your team to say, you know what? I'm afraid that if I ask for too much help, it'll seem like I don't really know what I'm doing and I'll get fired. Mm-hmm. That's a real thing. Mm-hmm. And nothing will spoil the soil.
Ooh. Hashtag. Ooh. Let's go.
Spoil the soil like that. I mean, go to culturebase.com/spoil for your t-shirts.
Dude, I want that.
So good. All right. Third thing, is there a sustainable org chart? Your org chart might be great for today, but will it sustain the scalability that you're hoping to have? Because if the infrastructure of that org chart won't support it, then when you get it, it's just going to come crumbling down. And that's a part of accountable communication, because who knows who reports to who answers to who gets direction from who. Those types of things can get real muddy. Let's keep it as clear as possible. Next, people know who they're accountable to and what for. That goes into that org chart, the accountability chart. Those are similar things, right? We want to build those in a way that provides success in accountable communication, so that the team knows who they're accountable to and what they're accountable for. This is a simple aspect of job descriptions. Do you have job descriptions for everybody on your team? Are you reviewing them annually? This is easy stuff, folks, to not spoil the soil. All right. So, last thing I want to say here on accountable communication. This seems like a very modern cliche of sensitivity. But listen, if you don't have a culture of see something, say something, like if people see something but they're afraid to say something, you spoil the soil. You spoil the soil. So you have to have all of these things in place for accountable communication.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add to that, Blake?
Yes. I know that a lot of people want to believe that accountable communication is a thing not desired. A players want it. A players who are really the way you're going to scale, getting a good number here, a good percentage, is by having a team of A players who love this stuff right here. If you think that, well, my team's not going to like this, then you might just not have the right team all the way through. Okay. Yeah. And so understanding that building this accountable communication is important is part of it. Now, all of this stuff we're talking about, you're like, wow, I just need to do all of this at once and change it all. No. If you come out scoring, let's say that was an 80% off that 54, right there, you're 43.68%. Okay, I know that's nerdy. Out of your 90, right? 43.68 out of 90, and you're like, I'm below 50%. First off, that's okay. See where you are. What area do you need to focus on first to go to the next level? And then you look at it. Well, like, we're actually scoring high percentages in our accountable communication, and our environment that supports growth and development is actually pretty good. We're just not finding the right people. Good. Increase that base number, because if you can increase that base number by which you're going to add multipliers to, it's going to be a bigger number. So being able to see this is why this formula is so important and so strong, and such a valuable tool to have, to be able to say, I'm missing it here, and we can focus here. And then after a year, where are we at? Okay, now we need to focus on this. Or after 3 months or 6 months, I don't know what it is, but there are some things you can do that are immediate. And then there are other things that you can do that are just permission to play things. Like, hey, we do have an org chart. We're just not making it clear to everyone. And hey, we do have a see something, say something environment by some people, but only people at the top are able to talk about it. And it's not entering a communication platform for all of us to say, hey, I saw this the other day and I feel like we need to change it. Okay, so maybe it's a platform thing. And so all this is doing is creating data points by which you can start saying, here's a place that I can take action. And that's what we've got to do in order to be scalable and have that right soil for which that seed of brilliance that you have in your product and in your ability to grow, for it to go into. You've got to have that place that you can start having action towards it.
Yeah. And I'll say too, just mathematically speaking, if you're a 46 point something out of 90, then you are above 50%, right? Because your total possible score is 90 if you get 46. So that's kind of how we're getting our overall, I don't know what the exact percentage is there, but let's just call it your 51%. So if we went through all of these things and you go, okay, well, what's my scalability factor? Your scalability factor, or the percentage of success that you actually are scalable, is 51%.
Yeah.
51%. Hey, halfway there, past halfway, right? People that are that in baseball that hit 51%, Hall of Famers, no question, first ballot. But we can do better, right? And so there's some things that we can implement right away. And so what we're going to do for the rest of the series is we're going to go through some exact examples of different culture types that you may find yourself in that can spoil the soil, or you can have a great harvest at the end of it. And so we're going to work our way towards the ideal culture over the next couple of episodes. I want you to tune in for that. Can't wait to be back with you next time on the Culture Base. Remember, don't spoil the soil. We'll talk to you next week.